I'm sorry. I don't approve of door-to-door fashion shows.
It's only $350.
I don't care. Get your mother of pearl out of here.
From a fictional band that outsold the Beatles to a tragic concert death that ended a superstar's career, the Partridge Family hid some shocking secrets behind its wholesome facade. Naked women camping in stars' cars, dental braces picking up Rolling Stones radio signals, and a mysterious disappearing bus are just the beginning. Here are 15 weird facts you didn't know about the Partridge Family. 1970. Fact 1. The lip-syncing secret.
Always landed, always came up empty-handed.
When you watched the Partridge Family perform their catchy songs on television, you probably assumed all 5 kids could actually sing. But the reality behind those harmonies was very different from what appeared on screen. Only 2 members of the entire television family actually provided vocals on the Partridge Family records, and the rest were essentially faking it the whole time. Shirley Jones and her stepson David Cassidy were the only cast members who sang on the albums, while Susan Day, Danny Bonaduce, Brian Forster, and Suzanne Cruff lip-synced to professional session musicians whenever the cameras rolled. The real voices behind those background harmonies belonged to a group called the Ron Hicklin Singers. Along with talented vocalists Tom Baller, John Baller, and Jackie Ward, who was known for her earlier hit song under the name Robin Ward. These studio musicians created the actual Partridge Family sound, while the young actors mimed along on set, playing instruments they couldn't actually play, and singing songs recorded by someone else entirely. The irony wasn't lost on the cast themselves, as Suzanne Cruff, who played Little Tracy, once described the group as the original Milli Vanilli in an interview years later. Even the instrumental parts were performed by elite studio musicians known as the Wrecking Crew, meaning virtually nothing you heard coming from the Partridge Family was actually created by the actors you saw on screen. David Cassidy later had to prove to the show's music producer that he could actually sing before being allowed to record his own vocal parts, which shows just how little faith the production had in their young television stars having any real musical talent. Fact 2. Outselling Lennon and McCartney.
Some people came here today to hear us play, and we're not going to disappoint them.
The Partridge Family accomplished something that seemed absolutely impossible for a fictional television band when their debut single reached the top of the music charts in November 1970. The song I Think I Love You didn't just become a hit, it became one of the biggest songs of the entire year, spending 3 weeks at #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 and selling more than 5 million copies in total. What made this achievement even more remarkable was that the Partridge Family song actually outsold one of the final Beatles singles during that same period, knocking the legendary band's Let It Be off the charts and taking its place at the top. Paul McCartney himself was sitting in the audience when David Cassidy accepted an award from the National Association of Recording Merchandisers, which had named I Think I Love You the Record of the Year. Cassidy later recalled the surreal moment of being an upstart young performer beating one of the greatest songwriters in music history. The song was released a month before the television show even premiered on ABC, which meant the Partridge Family had a #1 hit before most Americans had even seen them perform on their TV screens. This success made the Partridge Family only the 3rd fictional artist in music history to reach #1 on the charts, joining an extremely exclusive club. The single was featured in multiple episodes of the show's first season, including But the Memory Lingers On and My Son the Feminist, and it helped transform David Cassidy from an unknown television actor into one of the biggest teen idols of the 1970s almost overnight. Fact 3. Fictional band's real Grammy nod.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Partridge Family.
Goodbye.
6 months after the Partridge Family premiered on ABC television in September 1970, something completely unexpected happened that shocked even the show's own cast members. The Partridge Family received a nomination for Best New Artist at the 13th Annual Grammy Awards in 1971, competing against some of the most legitimate and talented musicians in the entire world. The fictional television band found themselves nominated alongside the Carpenters, who would ultimately win the award, as well as Elton John, Melba Moore, and Anne Murray, all of whom were genuine musicians with real careers. Shirley Jones later admitted in a 2020 interview that she was quite surprised to receive the nomination, saying she thought only newer rock acts and older established performers like Frank Sinatra or Miles Davis received Grammy nominations. The situation became even more absurd when you consider that the Partridge Family wasn't even a real band, and only 2 of the 5 nominated members actually sang on the records at all. Despite losing the Grammy to the Carpenters, both David Cassidy and Shirley Jones appeared at the March 1971 ceremony to present the musical siblings with a separate award for Best Contemporary Vocal Performance by a duo or group. The whole situation remains one of the strangest moments in Grammy history, as the Recording Academy essentially nominated a group of actors pretending to be musicians who were lip-syncing to session singers. The nomination happened because I Think I Love You had become such a massive commercial success that it couldn't be ignored, even though the entertainment industry knew the Partridge Family was manufactured specifically for television and had no plans to tour or perform as an actual musical group. Fact 4. Dad dates stepmom in Lost Pilot.
Have I forgotten anything?
Just a business license, we could open a cabana shop.
Before the Partridge Family made its debut on ABC in September 1970, the show filmed a completely different pilot episode in December 1969 that never aired and remains mostly unseen to this day. This unaired pilot contained several bizarre differences from the version that eventually reached television screens, starting with the fact that the widowed mother character wasn't even named Shirley. In this lost episode, Shirley Jones played a character named Connie Partridge, and the family lived in Ohio instead of California, completely changing the entire setting of the show. The most awkward aspect of this unaired pilot involved Shirley Jones's real-life husband, Jack Cassidy, who appeared as her character's boyfriend in an extended epilogue scene that showed Connie returning home from a date. This created the strange situation where Jack Cassidy was playing the romantic interest of his actual wife, while his real son David Cassidy watched from the sidelines as a cast member. The unaired pilot also contained much darker elements than the wholesome show that eventually aired, including dialogue where one of the children reveals that their deceased father had a drinking problem and would get drunk at Christmas parties. The network ultimately decided to go in a different direction and ditched Jack Cassidy's character entirely, which reportedly contributed to his growing jealousy and resentment as his wife and stepson became increasingly famous while his own role in the show disappeared. Another scene in the lost pilot showed Danny's voice starting to change, which would have created continuity problems as the show continued. The decision to remake the pilot and remove these darker, more complicated elements helped create the sunny, optimistic tone that made the Partridge Family a hit with family audiences. Fact 5. Sharing a house with witches.
Is the Committee on Mental Health up yet?
I don't think so.
Ah, good.
If you watched both The Partridge Family and Bewitched during the early 1970s, you might have noticed something strangely familiar about the Partridge home that appeared in exterior shots. The yellow and white house where the Partridge Family supposedly lived wasn't actually a real residence at all, but rather a structure on a studio backlot that had already appeared in numerous other television shows over the years. The same exact house served as the residence of Samantha and Darren Stevens' nosy neighbors, the Kravitzes, on the magical sitcom Bewitched, And for 2 overlapping seasons, from 1970 to 1972, both shows were filming simultaneously and using the same house for exterior shots. Viewers with particularly sharp eyes could sometimes spot the house looking especially prominent in the background when the Partridge Family's psychedelic bus drove past during the opening credits or various episodes. This backlot house had an incredibly long television career before the Partridge Family ever used it, having previously appeared on Dennis the Menace, The Donna Reed Show, and I Dream of Jeannie, making it one of the most frequently filmed houses in television history. The same block where this house stood was used by multiple production companies for various shows, which explains why so many different programs shared the same recognizable architecture. The house's television career didn't end when the Partridge Family went off the air in 1974, as it continued appearing in various productions for years afterward. Decades later, the house made another notable appearance in the 1998 film Pleasantville, starring Reese Witherspoon and Tobey Maguire. Sadly, this iconic piece of television history was demolished in 2023, meaning fans can no longer visit the location to see where both the Partridges and the Kravitzes supposedly lived. Fact 6. Teen Idol's shocking paycheck.
Yeah.
Why was
I
that?
think most parts of the world. Well, I think because of who I was.
At the absolute peak of his fame in the early 1970s, David Cassidy was one of the most recognized faces in the entire world, with a fan club reportedly larger than the Beatles or Elvis Presley ever had. His image appeared on everything imaginable, from lunchboxes and board games to cereal boxes and countless magazines, while companies made millions of dollars selling products featuring his likeness. Cassidy was selling out massive stadiums during his concert tours, sometimes playing to 56,000 people over a single weekend, and screaming fans would mob him everywhere he went. He would come home to find naked women camping out in his car or somehow inside his house, desperately trying to get close to their idol. Despite this incredible level of fame and the enormous profits being generated by his name and image, David Cassidy was earning only $600 per week from the show, which was an embarrassingly small amount even by 1970s standards. The young star had signed away his rights to his own image without receiving any royalties or additional compensation beyond his weekly paycheck, which meant he saw almost nothing from the millions of dollars in Partridge Family merchandise being sold. This exploitation of the teenage actor continued until his manager finally realized that David had been only 19 years old when he signed his original contract, which was below the legal age of 21 at that time. This discovery created a legal loophole that allowed David's team to renegotiate his entire contract, finally securing him royalties for singing lead vocals on the records and for appearing on all the Partridge Family merchandise. The renegotiation helped David Cassidy become one of the highest-paid entertainers in the world. But the damage had already been done during those early years when others profited enormously from his talent and image while paying him a pittance. Fact 7. The White City Stadium Tragedy.
Who are you waiting for?
David Cassidy,
Who's he?
the pop singer.
On May 26, 1974, David Cassidy performed at London's White City Stadium during what would become one of the most tragic concerts in rock and roll history. Approximately 35,000 excited fans had packed into the venue to see their idol, but the massive crowd quickly became dangerous as the show began. When Cassidy hit the stage, the screaming reached a fever pitch, and the crowd began surging forward uncontrollably, with approximately 800 people pressing toward the stage in a frenzied wave. Hundreds of fans were injured in the chaos, and 30 people required immediate hospitalization for their wounds. Among the injured was 14-year-old Bernadette Whelan, who had been crushed by the crowd and stopped breathing altogether. Emergency workers frantically managed to restart her heart, and she was rushed to Hammersmith Hospital, but she never regained consciousness. 4 days later, on May 30th, Bernadette died from traumatic asphyxiation, with the coroner describing her as a victim of contrived hysteria. David Cassidy was shocked deeply by the news and initially wanted to cancel his remaining tour dates, but other people involved with the tour convinced him to continue. He performed one final concert in Manchester 2 days after the tragedy, though the show drew only 8,000 of the expected 20,000 fans, as parents had returned tickets due to safety fears. Cassidy did not attend Bernadette's funeral to avoid creating a media circus, but he sent flowers and a message of condolence to her grieving family. Bernadette's parents publicly stated they did not blame David for their daughter's death, saying Bernadette would not have liked them to blame him. The tragedy marked the end of David Cassidy's career as a touring teen idol and haunted him for the rest of his life. Fact 8. Luke Skywalker's early TV appearance.
Is Lori here?
No, she's at the dentist.
Oh. Well, that's where she said she was going when she broke our date, but, I just thought something might be wrong.
No, not exactly. The dentist is gonna
Give her a checkup.
Long before Mark Hamill wielded a lightsaber and battled the Empire as Luke Skywalker in Star Wars, the 19-year-old actor made one of his very first television appearances on the Partridge Family in a memorable episode from the show's first season. The episode, titled Old Scrapmouth, aired in January 1971 and featured Hamill in his third-ever television role as a character named Jerry, who was Laurie Partridge's boyfriend from across the street. The plot of the episode centered around Laurie's embarrassment over having to wear braces just as Jerry was finally working up the courage to ask her to go steady. The situation became even more complicated when manager Reuben Kincaid booked the family to perform on a high-profile television talk show hosted by a character named Wink Burgess. During rehearsals for the televised performance, something extremely bizarre started happening to Laurie's new braces that threatened to ruin the family's big opportunity. Her dental work began picking up radio signals from a nearby radio, causing her to hear the Rolling Stones playing inside her mouth while she tried to play the piano. The interference made her play completely off-key, jeopardizing the entire family's performance until they discovered that Jerry's radio was causing the feedback. 7 years after this quirky sitcom appearance, Mark Hamill became an international superstar when Star Wars premiered in 1977, but during his brief time on the Partridge Family, he was just another young actor trying to build his career. The episode required very little actual acting from Hamill, and viewers who watched it when it originally aired would have had no idea they were watching the future face of one of cinema's most iconic franchises playing a love-struck teenager on a family musical comedy show. Fact 9. The kid nobody could stand.
Are hives like little red marks all over your face?
Yes.
Guess what your neighbors let me play with?
During the first season of the Partridge Family, the role of youngest brother Chris Partridge was played by a 9-year-old actor named Jeremy Gelbwax, but his time on the show was marked by constant conflict and tension with virtually everyone involved in the production. According to David Cassidy, Jeremy had a personality conflict with every single person in the cast and with the producers as well, creating an extremely difficult working environment. The situation became so bad that Danny Bonaduce, who was only 10 years old himself, later admitted on the show Behind the Music that he wasn't above kicking Jeremy before they would film scenes together. The official story released by the studio claimed that Jeremy's family had moved away, which necessitated replacing him with another actor, but this was completely false. The real reason Jeremy left the show was that the entire cast and crew had complained about his behavior, and nobody wanted to work with him anymore. When the second season began, Jeremy was replaced by Brian Forster, who was a year younger and had blonde hair instead of Jeremy's brown hair, making the swap extremely obvious to anyone paying attention. Despite the very noticeable change in the actor playing Chris Partridge, something remarkable happened after the replacement occurred. The studio executives waited nervously for the inevitable flood of angry letters from fans who would be upset about their favorite character suddenly looking completely different. But that flood never came. The show didn't receive even a single complaint letter about the casting change. which suggested that viewers either didn't notice the difference or simply didn't care enough about the character to protest. This complete lack of audience reaction proved that Jeremy Gelbwaks had made so little impression on viewers that replacing him caused absolutely no controversy whatsoever. Fact 10. Memory genius with a reading problem.
Lori seed catalog from Chicago. Keith, love letter.
How do you know it's a love letter?
It's written in crayon. Lori, letter.
10-year-old Danny Bonaduce faced serious challenges when the Partridge Family first started filming, particularly during script readings where he struggled so badly that he could barely make it through his lines. During the production of one relatively simple scene, Danny had so much difficulty remembering his lines that the director had to call for take after take, eventually requiring 36 attempts before they finally captured a usable performance. His castmates and the production crew initially assumed Danny was simply a struggling young actor who lacked the necessary skills for television work, but the reality of his situation was much more complicated. Danny had undiagnosed dyslexia, which meant he couldn't properly read and learn his lines from the script like everyone else on the show. Once the cast and crew realized what was actually causing Danny's difficulties, they began taking extra steps to help the young actor learn his dialogue by speaking the lines to him rather than expecting him to read them from a page. This different approach revealed something absolutely remarkable about Danny's brain that nobody had suspected. Danny Bonaduce possessed an eidetic memory, sometimes called a photographic memory, which meant he could remember virtually everything he heard with perfect accuracy. Once Danny learned his lines verbally, he would not only remember all of his own dialogue, but could actually remember every single line that every other actor in the show was supposed to say. This incredible ability meant that Danny would sometimes correct his castmates when they got their lines wrong, which didn't always make him popular on set. The combination of severe dyslexia with an extraordinary memory created a unique situation where Danny appeared to be the worst student during script readings but became the most knowledgeable person on set once filming actually began. Fact 11. Carol Brady could have been.
Trainer, groom, entry fee. This is getting to be very expensive.
In 1970, Shirley Jones was an Oscar-winning actress with an impressive Broadway and film career who was being offered multiple television roles as she raised 3 young sons with her husband, Jack Cassidy. One of the offers she received that year was for a brand new ABC sitcom about a blended family with 6 children, 3 boys and 3 girls, who navigate life together after their widowed parents marry each other. The show was called The Brady Bunch, and the role of Carol Brady would have made Shirley Jones the mother of one of television's most iconic families. However, Jones turned down the role because she looked at the scripts and realized that Carol Brady was essentially a traditional housewife who would spend most of her scenes in the kitchen preparing food and not doing much else that was particularly interesting or challenging for an actress of her caliber. Jones later explained that while the idea of playing a mother on the Brady Bunch was initially attractive, she ultimately rejected it because she didn't want to be portrayed as a stereotypical character who was simply taking the roast out of the oven. Instead, Jones accepted the lead role in The Partridge Family, where Shirley Partridge was conceived as television's first working mother with an actual career beyond homemaking. Shirley Partridge quits her job as a bank teller to join her children's singing group and manages their rise to superstardom, making her a much more active and central character than Carol Brady ever was. Jones was drawn to the role for 2 main reasons. First, because Shirley was destined to become a groundbreaking representation of working mothers on television, and second, because working on the series would allow Jones to maintain an almost full-time presence at home to raise her own children while still pursuing her acting career. Fact 12. The missing psychedelic school bus.
And what is this, the Manson family bus?
The iconic psychedelic bus that carried the Partridge Family to their gigs became one of the most recognizable vehicles in television history, but its fate after the show ended remains shrouded in mystery and conflicting reports. The bus started its life as a completely ordinary school bus, purchased from the Orange County School District in California for just $500. The production team transformed this plain yellow school bus into a rolling piece of pop art by painting it with colorful Mondrian-inspired patterns featuring geometric blocks of red, blue, yellow, and black, creating the instantly recognizable look that defined the show. Shirley Jones actually learned to drive a manual transmission specifically for her role, as she was required to drive the bus herself during many scenes throughout the series. After the Partridge Family ended in 1974, the bus seemingly vanished, and its whereabouts became the subject of intense speculation and various contradictory stories. Some people claimed the bus was repainted completely white and used on another television show called Apple's Way that aired in 1974. Other reports suggested the bus appeared in the background of a 1982 episode of the TV show Chips. Many Los Angeles residents remember seeing a bus that was supposedly the actual Partridge Family bus parked behind a restaurant called Lucy's Tacos near the University of Southern California throughout the early 1980s. However, automotive enthusiasts later claimed that the bus at Lucy's Tacos was actually a 1957 Chevrolet tribute bus rather than the original 1955 Chevrolet 6500 Superior used in filming. The only consensus among researchers is that the original Partridge Family bus was ultimately sent to a California scrapyard in 1987, where photographs show what appears to be the badly damaged body of the famous vehicle. The true fate of this television icon remains uncertain. Fact 13. The Grease Connection Twist.
Mom, I didn't do a thing about that. I just bought a $10 dress.
Honey, it isn't your fault. They found out we're rich and the sharks are coming in for...
When producers began casting the Partridge Family in 1969, their first choice to play eldest daughter, Lori Partridge, wasn't the actress who ultimately became famous in the role. The production team initially wanted Olivia Newton-John, who was already building a singing career in England, to take the part of the smart and talented Partridge daughter. Newton-John ultimately passed on the opportunity, which opened the door for Susan Day, a 17-year-old model from Illinois with virtually no acting experience, to audition for the role. Screen Gems producer Paul Witt had been unable to find the right actress for Lori in Hollywood, so he traveled to New York specifically to search for fresh faces. One look at Susan, described as a slim and graceful high school junior with wide eyes and undeniable charm, convinced him she was perfect for the part, despite her complete lack of dramatic training. Susan got the role and spent 4 years playing Lori Partridge, becoming a beloved television star in the process. Then in 1978, 8 years after the Partridge Family premiered, an interesting twist of fate occurred during the casting of the movie musical Grease. The producers of Grease initially wanted Susan Day to play Sandy, the female lead opposite John Travolta's Danny Zuko, and Susan was considered the frontrunner for the role. However, Susan's manager advised her to turn down the part, and the role eventually went to none other than Olivia Newton-John, the same actress who had originally been offered the role that made Susan Day famous. This created a bizarre circular situation where Olivia passed on the Partridge Family, which launched Susan's career, and then Susan passed on Grease, which became one of Olivia's most iconic roles. Both actresses ended up with the roles they were meant to play, but the universe certainly seemed to enjoy playing games with their careers. Fact 14. Unrequited love on set.
Last time he said that, he hocked my stereo.
Throughout the entire 4-year run of the Partridge Family, Susan Day harbored a massive secret crush on her television brother, David Cassidy, that she carefully kept hidden from almost everyone involved with the show. Susan was only 2 years younger than David, and the two became close friends almost immediately when filming began, But for Susan, those feelings ran much deeper than simple friendship. While David enjoyed what he thought was a purely platonic sibling-like relationship with his young co-star, Susan was quietly pining for him and hoping that someday he might see her as something more than just his television sister. The situation became increasingly painful for Susan because David would constantly regale her with detailed stories about his life as a touring rock star, including tales of the countless groupies who followed him around and the various women he was dating or sleeping with during his travels. Susan would sit and listen to these stories like a good friend, never revealing that each tale of David's romantic conquests was breaking her heart a little bit more. David remained completely oblivious to Susan's true feelings for months or possibly years, continuing to share intimate details of his love life without realizing the effect his words were having. Finally, Shirley Jones couldn't stand watching Susan suffer in silence any longer, so she took David aside and told him that his stories were genuinely hurting Susan because she had deep feelings for him. David was shocked to learn the truth, having never suspected that Susan saw him as anything other than a friend and co-worker. After the Partridge Family ended in 1974, David and Susan did attempt to date briefly, finally giving their relationship a chance outside the context of playing siblings on television. However, the romantic relationship didn't work out, and the two eventually went their separate ways, with Susan later claiming that she never felt comfortable in David's presence. Fact 15. When Mom got too real.
Danny, don't you think we could get something a little less luxurious, like something in a nice wash and wear?
Mom, it's not a luxury.
The production of The Partridge Family was generally a happy experience for most of the cast, but Danny Bonaduce's behavior on set could sometimes try everyone's patience since he was, after all, still just a kid. One day during filming, Danny was acting up particularly badly, misbehaving, and causing problems for the rest of the cast and crew who were trying to get their work done. Shirley Jones, who played Danny's television mother and had developed genuine maternal feelings toward her young co-star, reached the absolute limit of her patience with Danny's antics. In a moment of complete exasperation, Shirley forgot entirely that she was on a television set and not actually Danny's real mother, and she ordered him to go upstairs to his room immediately as punishment for his behavior. The entire cast and crew burst into laughter because the Partridge Family set didn't actually have an upstairs level at all, making Shirley's command completely impossible to follow. The funny moment reminded everyone that Shirley had temporarily forgotten she was acting and had slipped into treating Danny like one of her own children at home. On another occasion, when the cast felt that Danny was getting too big for his britches and needed to be taken down a peg, they conspired to teach him a lesson about humility. The cast convinced Susan Day to sneak up behind Danny and pour milk over his head while cameras weren't rolling, soaking him completely as payback for his arrogant attitude. The prank worked so well and created such a memorable moment that the writers later incorporated a similar scene into an actual episode of the show, though in the televised version, the milk was poured over David Cassidy's character, Keith, instead of Danny, to avoid making it seem like the show was targeting the youngest cast member.